Victoria, how you doing? Are you okay? Is this are you healthy? Are you just is that a work requirement, the mask? Not that I have an issue.
Oh, I'm at work. Yeah, so I step out to take a break for the class. Oh, sorry. It's a requirement. I'm at work. I take a break to attend class.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay. Oh, here we go. Anna. Wait, I can probably do a little couple admin notes while I wait for Trevor and oh. You know, it is actually hard to shut down Zoom.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it doesn't want you to shut down. It's like you have to click on something and then it'll say, are you sure you want to end meeting or just this particular, all meetings or this meeting? I'm like, I don't know. Okay. Like Derek is just the back. It's just plain wall, just a plain wall. I'm not distracted. No, just a plain wall. I don't get distracted by Star Wars toys. I mean, really, honestly, Trevor. Oh, no, I mean, oh, that's me. Sorry. Okay. Honestly, I mean, I shouldn't really get in, try to be funny today. This is kind of okay. To next week, I got a couple of good announcements to make. We should be having. Should have a guest speaker next week. This one, and yeah, we should have a guest speaker next week, either Tuesday or Thursday. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Antonio Escobel. He has been a professor at Adams State University in Denver. He's probably for 30 some odd years, but he's retired. Yeah, he's retired, but when tenured professors retire, they're called Professor Emeritus, which means if you come on and that just means you're not, I don't know, you're always a professor forever and a day, and now you're retired and you get that distinction or title. So he'll be here Tuesday or Thursday. He grew up in the area of Grenada, Lamar. Family were migrant workers, and he has said, yeah. He actually gave me stuff he'd like to talk about. Has anybody got any concerns about Tuesday or Thursday, if you guys wanted to be here for that? The choice, I have to let them know which day, Tuesday or Thursday. It might be just Thursday, so I can kind of play. I'm always playing catch up. All right. So yeah, he's the one that he wrote his written a biography, and you guys saw his stuff on the La Colonia.
Oh, okay.
Stuff.
Yeah.
Towards the end of it, and with the oral histories and transcripts from Lamar Community College. I think that was Jennifer Goodland. So let's go ahead, and I got a little bit of today's a little bit of tough love. Okay, a little bit. Yeah, tough love. And in a more professional teacher-student kind of way. Okay, don't take what I got and just warp it or anything like that. Just okay. Before I do put you guys on slides. All right, so today we'll starting today or tonight, I should say, starting today through the weekend, I'll be grading your midterms online on Blackboard. If you guys had done that, well, you have, because I saw it, where I just used is tied to the rubric, and I'll start making comments and the on Blackboard there and the rubric. And I take in consideration at least a couple things. That you turned in the midterm on time, that you show up for classes or the Zoom classes, or for most, a good example is actually if you submitted your drafts to me once or twice or 3 or 4 times, you know who you are, maybe 5. I did say a couple times. Of course, I really don't have any blame to put on anybody because I get the 4th or 5th draft and I still make comments on it. And but what was I saying? Yeah, I'll be grading those through the weekend. And you'll see that I wanted to do it towards where you take that same one, my comments, it's going to be where at least 1 or 2 things where, you know, you guys find yourselves in the right direction, but you kind of don't realize that subconsciously or just thinking, case of maybe thinking too much, not thinking enough, or on another part, then I'll take that and guide you to that direction. And of course, it goes to guide you towards your really as you're revising or fixing of your midterm, basically statement of need or statement of protest. So let me look at my syllabus again. This week, you should have been looking at the last couple days, the required viewing. It may at some points be redundant for a couple of you because you probably have already gone on to mountainscholar.org and looked at all the oral history interviews, which is good. I think this week was more specifically that tied to the history of Salt Creek area of Pueblo and environmental racism and a lot of stuff. If you have not yet looked, the things you need to look at for sure is Louis Luggs Garcia. He's the one who was prominent also with, not prominent, he was also active within the Chicano movement, but as he saw the injustice going on with Salt Creek, then he came aboard and started protesting himself and community organization and trying to change, I believe, public policy or local municipal policies or decisions there in regards to Salt Creek. So I need to look at Louis Luggs Garcia. Now, Jose Ortega's stuff is tied to that. But I need to see if you can go more specifically at what Louis Luggs Garcia may have said about it himself. I think that's, and anything else to worth starting with the Chicano movement. And really, you need to have somewhat of, get in there and look at the connection between when the Chicano movement started in nationwide, particularly California and Cesar Chavez, the grape strikes, I think. And it was a little bit earlier in the 1960s, really. And the, I'm not sure, San Fernando Valley, I think. Okay. All right. By next week, though, you're going to be getting into required readings of Paul Harvey's Amache. Okay. This is when we're going to get into part of the 20th century and Japanese Americans, all right, and their movement relocation during World War II to Grenada, Colorado. Next week we should be talking about Pueblo and Chicano movement as it's tied to like this week's environmental racism, but also just overall. I hope I'm not I hope I'm not portraying this that the Chicano movement was solely something towards migrant labor. I hope everybody understands it wasn't just the treatment of migrant labor. It was also what it was other areas, right? In education, which we'll get into a little bit here. Okay, so let me and the hemp analysis. Really quiet. I think it's just hemp analysis workshop. Okay, so that's starting next week. I need probably put in there required viewing of the data's websites that I initially put on from the very beginning of the semester.
Mhm.
You know, on the left pane Blackboard is hemp analysis links. You need to start getting into there, and I'll be more pinpointing and see like the next class next week whether or not I'll be checking on learning, checking on whether you've been looking. One of the concerns I do have is whether or not who has not been on Colorado Historic Newspapers.org. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm not getting many happy faces there. I'm getting kind of
I used one of the things from that source for my paper, so
okay, great. I mean, I know one of you did. This is going to be starting to be very important because this is now we're getting into the period of time that's where a lot of you'll stuff pull out as far as the Chicano movement, 1960s and through to now, especially to now. One of the things I want to make sure you guys understand though, and Zotero is not the site, it's not the source that you cite. The Zotero is not the actual, it's neither a primary source nor a secondary source. Zotero is just a tool to use for you guys, anybody, to store and organize those primary or secondary sources. It is the primary or secondary source upon which you cite within your paper according to Chicago manual style. I want to make sure that's perfectly clear. All right. That's really not should be difficult as far as just going in there. I believe Zotero will build your bibliography and build your footnote. Correct me if I'm wrong. It is probably you're going to pulling it out from Zotero and you're going to some sort of citation machine online. No, it's just why do you put access date on some of these stuff you pull off online is because that way somebody will come back and say, well, let me go to it. And when was the most recent time that may still be available or not? That's why you put it. But in Zotero, not everybody else has access other than what put together here internally. All right. So,
one of the things with this Zotero, they don't really provide a URL for anything other than Zotero. So just putting the URL becomes a problem, for me at least.
what do you mean? I'm not
Like
sure.
the link.
Oh.
So it only
Okay.
provides the Zotero link.
Yeah, I think. No, I don't want that. I don't want the Zotero link.
Okay.
You need to go to where it is originally on the internet. Originally, first origin source. Not wherever it was and stored, okay, semi-permanently or permanently. Zotero is not the permanent repository of the sources, actually quite temporary.
If you click on, like if you type in the article titles into Google Scholar will give you the citation in any format that you desire.
That's correct. I was going to mention Google Scholar today. I should have mentioned it. There's so much I could mention about where to go to find stuff, like articles. Google Scholar is a good example. Discussion prompt is due on the 30th. What is the next discussion prompt? Discussion response prompt. Okay, Tuesday.
Salt Creek. The discussion prompt is about Salt
Build
Creek.
on what it is that we've looked at already, what you've done with your midterm. Take what we, between the time that we looked at whatever this week, and I did have an idea. I just wasn't prepared to discuss it right now because I was going to do it towards the end of the class. So, all right, I have a little bit of stuff for you to do a little bit differently today. This is in response to you guys are going to have your own little time for discussing, answer questions. And then we'll, by the end of that session, we'll go ahead, I'll get back on and we'll look and answer these questions. Well, these are questions I've already asked you guys. So it's a little, well, this is the tough love part, all right. Okay, I've already been recording. So you better, hope you got your pen and paper out. I hope you got your kind of break. You're gonna have, this is, I think it's the fourth wall, and that's the Zoom video conference. You guys are not physically with each other. All right, this is an attempt to kind of break down that wall starting now. So I want you guys to discuss these things and be able to in about 20, 30 minutes, be able to answer the questions. But I'll go ahead and give you the questions now. Okay, the first one. So I should probably share these with you, the slides themselves, but okay, the first one is this. So you got like 1, 2, 3 or 4 questions. We'll go over them real quick. Let's see. All right, you ready? So first one, what are the 2 statements I made at the end of class on Tuesday? All right, there was 2 things. I looked at my notes. I gave them to you towards the end of class. The second question is looking at, if you've read the Hernandez's little chapter on the Rocky Ford cantaloupes, and as far as the concept of taste, using that as a way of gauging the extent of that popularity and the growing of cantaloupe in Rocky Ford. All right, this has already been put up there on the other previous day Zoom classes. So that's the second question. The third one is cantaloupes as monoculture. All right, we've already brought in the the context of Japanese immigration to the area of Rocky Ford and cultural influence, like we got into on Tuesday with help of Aiden. All right, and I mentioned about Hirikata farms. So that's the third question. What does mean by monoculture? All right. All right, that's probably the same question. Okay, so that's the 3. That's how many questions is that? 3 questions. The fourth one is this one about the Bracero program and going in here, looking at this particular thesis done up by Vanny Cannon, that and looking at the poem, actually no, the song or poem that Woody Guthrie wrote, and I initially mentioned it. So the question here is there, what is the extent upon which that, what is Woody Guthrie talking about in the poem or song, and what is Vanny Cannon trying to use Woody Guthrie for in his or her thesis? I'm not sure. All right, so that's 4 questions. You shouldn't, these are the questions I've been asking you guys as far as the feedback over the last week or so. And we'll get into, hopefully, we'll get to something today about the sugar beet industry as colonizers. All right. But now it is, you guys, it's 10:52. So about 11:15, 11:20. So you guys gonna have to force yourselves to break off the fourth wall here between each other, discuss this, and answer these 4 questions. So starting now, I'm gonna be quiet. We'll get back on 11:15, 11:20. Share.
All right, what question are we gonna go over first?
I mean, we might as well start in order, I guess. So
All right.
probably the 2 statements at the end of class.
At the end of class, he was talking about environmental racism, a help analysis workshop introduction. He talked about Amachi's national significance, migrant labor is used for Amachi. He talked about that, but I don't know if like specific statements off the top of my head. Also, that interview, the YouTube link.
Mm-hmm.
So
Tough. I'm chatting the questions too, so I'm gonna stop video. Oh.
anything else? Anyone else?
As far as stuff we went over, we also watched that one clip. I forget who put it out about
Oh, yeah.
migrant labor.
That was the video about the sugar beets
Mm-hmm.
that was shown down in Mexico to try to entice people to come up and work.
Yeah, and like we went over whether we thought that it was an accurate reflection of, the actual conditions that were
Yeah,
going on.
which I believe we decided was not.
Yeah.
Oh. About the sugar beet period from 1920 to 1960. We talked about Reuben, Mexican and Hispanics in Colorado Springs and communities there. Talked about the Japanese Ishin, Japanese U.S.-born Isen, which are just generational immigrants and Japanese Americans. But anybody else want to comment or no?
I think things froze up. I'm not sure.
So
Oh.
my audio went out. What version are we on?
Still sort of talking about question 1, I guess. Just curious if anyone else has anything to add. Did you hear any of that, Victoria, or no? Okay. I guess we go to question 2 if no one else has anything to add.
Is it just the 3 of us now, or did we get put in a breakout?
I have no idea.
I don't either. Okay. Sorry, I'm looking over my notes. Let's see. We talked about the monoculture. We talked about your paper and kind of the difference between the Japanese view of the land as the Westerners. Oh, I don't know. I think I maybe lost everyone.
You're glitching out.
Yeah, I'm having problems with mine.
Hello?
Can you hear me? No?
So if we are on question 2 about the cantaloupe, is it Marcus Hernandez that we're talking about specifically?
Yes. Okay. And real quick as a test, can people hear? Because I'm getting like cut in and out.
I
far
can
as
hear you
sound.
now, but I'm having the same issue where sometimes I can hear maybe 1 or 2 people and then nothing for a little bit. So I don't know. It feels like it's really choppy.
Yeah, that's how mine is.
I haven't read all of the Marcus Hernandez paper, but it's really good what I've read. Because he's using. Let me see if I can get into it. Split up. But yeah, he's and when in regards to the cantaloupes, he's talking about how there's a certain taste that people wanted, and they're choosing for the
Hello?
taste.
Yeah, I think that. Okay, can you hear me before I start talking?
Yes.
Okay. I thought it was interesting too because there was somewhere in there where I read how he kind of compared cantaloupes down there to like gold and steel, like the importance of them.
Yes.
And I think that from being down here, I don't know, you hear about how much of an importance cantaloupes were and have been throughout history down here. And I was reading too, it wasn't like a big portion of what I read when I remember reading it, but it kind of ties into the third question of how really the climate down here was like perfect for cantaloupes because it got so cool in the evenings and just kind of the way the sugar set in. But yeah, which allowed for that taste and stuff and the demand for them to really rise.
In his thesis, he also talked about how when individuals go and they want to farm a certain agricultural product, they create the farmland to be the flora and all of that will help that certain agriculture product grow specifically, and they created like an economic niche as a direct quote that will survive for nearly over 150 years. And so like because of like how they affected the geographic like conditions, the agriculture and the climate and all of that, like that was something that he had really.
I didn't catch that last little bit, Victoria. I'm sorry. I got everything up until right before you put your mask back on.
So in his paper, he talked about how the geographical, geological, and the climate conditions all were believed behind to be absolutely like perfect for cantaloupe. However, like later realized how unpredictable Colorado agriculture and weather can all be.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so in the chat, he gave us a clue for the first question, and the clue's national significance. I'm trying to remember what that statement would have been.
I can't.
So I know that he did discuss how people didn't buy the cantaloupe. Basically, they didn't pick and choose based on how it looked, but based upon the fact that they love the taste of the cantaloupe. They had a lot of international consumers because of how popular the taste was, and it was like kind of like for the industry in Colorado was for like the cantaloupes, and they even compared it to like Old Mountain Creek and some other aspects such as that. So basically, Rocky Ford was like pioneer of like the cantaloupe industry he talked about, and so that's what kind of brought it like international fame. Is they were well known for this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I even think it's interesting. So given that I've moved around several times because my stepdad's in the Air Force, I would have people in both North Carolina and in Las Vegas, Nevada, when I would say I was from Colorado in the Rocky Ford area, they would, talk about cantaloupes. So I think,
Interesting.
yeah, so they'd be like, oh my gosh, you should like bring cantaloupe. And I was actually always surprised that, people knew about that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and even still today, I mean, like, I still think it's, every year you have the farm markets down here that open, and cantaloupe and watermelon is still, like, I think the major portion of that.
I'm trying to think. I don't know if I've ever noticed any Rocky Ford stickers on cantaloupes in grocery stores, but I definitely remember stopping in Rocky Ford for cantaloupe.
Mm.
Okay, so do we move on to monoculture?
Yeah.
What is monoculture? I mean, I think it's, you know, a single item, or, you know, like a single agricultural item that gets, I'm thinking in terms of like genetics, there's not a lot of variation. You just have basically a single variety, and there's no variation in it. And I think when you start looking at large agricultural projects, there's, you know, lack of diversity in your agriculture.
And I think another way too to look at it is like, for example, we don't hear about Rocky Ford corn like the same way that we do Rocky Ford cantaloupe, just as in like the Midwest, you know, it's predominantly corn that's grown, you know, so yeah, I don't know if that made sense or not, but
no, I get that. Yeah, and usually it's, you know, a handful of varieties. I know, I'm thinking like for corn, you know, like Iowa is like the corn state, right?
mm-hmm.
And I think there's only like maybe 2 or 3 varieties that are predominant.
Yeah.
Which is awesome if you want consistency, but not good if you want a sustainable. I don't know. When you have monoculture, it's more susceptible to big changes. You know, because your variety isn't used to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Guys are quiet. All right.
We're talking.
I know regarding the cantaloupes as a monoculture, he brought up in the last class how there was a cultural influence to it. Specifically, I don't recall exactly what he said, but I know he brought that up. I don't know if we just touched on that or not. Sorry if I'm repeating things.
To just you remember the fact that they were talking about a cultural aspect to it, but however, I do not recall specifically what they were hitting on because I remember thinking about both the natural and cultural aspects, but I'm not necessarily aware.
I'm not sure if it was just on my end, but I didn't quite get the connection. It was like, I don't know, it was breaking out really bad.
Okay. To add on to what Justine was saying about the culture, I know it talked about how like consumer taste buds is what kind of drove the cultural representation of Rocky Ford as like the national cantaloupe. So that was like how they were nationally recognized as the culture, agriculture in Rocky Ford is as like the cantaloupe. So not necessarily sure what else they had said about it.
Yeah. Well, and I do think too that just I don't know, the popularity that it had down here, like that strong footing, really held it to where not only would it become a national thing, but also to where it would last how long it has. Like it hasn't just died down. Now, obviously, the history with like the listeria outbreak that occurred, I think really damaged its reputation. But I still think that, I don't know, I think it goes back to, the concept of taste with it, that it was so predominant that it didn't completely kill off the industry because watermelon and cantaloupe are still,
Right.
grown in large amounts down here.
When people think of cantaloupe, the taste that they're thinking of is the Rocky Ford cantaloupe.
Yeah. Yep.
We're missing today. We're missing. All right. Hey, good job. Let's go ahead and get into answering these questions. So I want to go ahead and not bring up the slides. I'll just keep you guys up on my main screen here. Sound like you were at least had some discussion back and forth. That's and you had my sub for a moment there. Probably more distraction than anything else. But anyways, all right. Let's go ahead and work from what I talked about last two things Tuesday. So what was a clue I gave you guys a moment ago over the chat? It's national significance, historical significance, however you want it. I like to throw stuff out there. I know that's something that diving into stuff that I don't want to get theoretical on too much, but as you guys do statement of need, a protest or something, and if you want to justify something that you find that there's still needs for information to be provided to the public about continued and almost really recent events of problems that we see. So what were those two things? The two things I talked about Tuesday towards the end of class.
In regards to Amachi, correct? Or that was one of them? Or no? Or more of the labor side of things?
Yeah, I think that was the second. What was it? There was probably two parts to this historical significance. If you were doing a statement of need, Grenada. Something we'll lead into here in a moment as far as the sugar beet industry, first of all, and how they actually had labor. How was that formed? The need for labor was, how was it recognized? How was it formed by the sugar beet industry around the turn of the 20th century? One term I want you guys already know, of course, by this. You mentioned the second thing, and that's, what was the thing I said I really wanted to do the first time that has really been done before within any other college class as far as Arkansas Valley, as far as historical significance. And what I think that's important to understand was the way the sugar beet industry brought in these recruited labor was really an establishment of colonies. Colonies, and something we'll get into a little bit, but comparing it later on within the mid part of the post-World War II era, as far as their housing conditions and work living conditions, and using that comparison as part of that historical significance for today in Grenada. And second part was I was trying to see if, as much as I can, to synthesize the aspects of both within labor history, Mexican Americans and Japanese Americans, Arkansas Valley. Okay, that was the two things I had mentioned on Tuesday. What was the second question I had you guys ask? What was Professor Hernandez's consideration? And what validity do you think, your own opinion in regards to using that as connecting to, as far as providing a history of agriculture in not just Arkansas Valley, but Rocky Ford, for example?
Well, some of the things that we talked about was how there became the demand for it, and in the paper, cantaloupes are compared to things like steel, and I forget what else I said earlier. Gold.
Yeah.
And because there was such a strong footing for that in Rocky Ford, that was able to hold up and set for the national stage. But yeah, it just kind of became a
national economy, perhaps.
Yeah. Because even today, I think so much of the economy down here, it obviously relies on agriculture, but a big part of that agriculture still is watermelon and cantaloupes.
Okay, so what else do you think helps within this? I guess the basic question is, did Rocky Ford cantaloupe taste better? And how did they find that out? How did they figure that out? Why? Is the ability to find out whether or not it was a subjective, objective, or even was that consideration part of the ability to, can we use it within this class like Professor Hernandez did it for his dissertation, PhD. Are we able to shed a light on how the things were grown physically or organically, or how can we look at that and see how it was differently from anybody else?
Yeah, wasn't it just based on like the climate? So you had a mix of the like hot and dry climates, but then in the evening it really got cool, and that's kind of when the sugar would set in, and that was the big part of what the claim of why Rocky Ford cantaloupes tasted so different, was because of that sugar content.
So let's lead into the next question. What is monoculture then? You just tie in what Trevor just said. What else? What is monoculture?
Monoculture is just growing one plant.
One variety.
And in our discussion, I don't know if this kind of relates with that question, but we were talking about how we don't know Rocky Ford for like their corn, but the Midwest has corn. It's predominantly corn. Rocky Ford, it's their cantaloupe. So even though it's not just cantaloupe grown down here, that is, the monoculture is cantaloupe is what is thought of when thought of Rocky Ford agriculture.
Grown for?
Down here, or like?
Yeah. No.
Down here, it's mostly for feed. It's not for human consumption.
All right. So can you describe in areas in particular what's grown, particular people and everything that's connected to that? Can there be more than one? Can there be more than one monoculture? And that sounds like a contradictory term there, but you mentioned two things, but they're different, right? And different focus for different reasons and for different, Can we consider them still monoculture? As we saw historically from the 19th century, we see how what was brought in first?
The alfalfa came first,
Alfalfa, yeah.
and it just sort of
Sorry.
progressed from there. The
Yeah.
other types of
Yeah, I
agriculture.
mean before. No, don't get too tunnel vision in regards to what is part of agriculture. What came in first? When like we go back to Boxville, what was there first?
Oh,
Are we
cattle and
talking
sheep.
sheep and cattle? Yeah.
Okay, livestock, and then we developed what was, there's almost a basic element of just feeding the animals, But again, we get to a point like you just mentioned, alfalfa, and just for feed. And even within that area, you try to just make profit off of that, and not necessarily. So what we see is a slow progression away from subsistence. So that's the biggest difference there. And then one of the biggest parts of monoculture is a stepping away from just growing stuff for just subsistence. All right, and how that impacts culture. Let's go ahead and move on. What was Woody Guthrie's song or poem? Was it a song or poem?
Well, he wrote it as a poem, but and I don't think he really had a melody for it for a long time. I think it was developed by somebody else, but it's about a plane crash in which a bunch of migrant workers were killed, but there were 4 Americans killed, and the Americans were the only ones who were named in the press releases about the crash.
Okay. Was there something wrong with just identifying certain people's names and not mentioning these other people's names?
Well, I mean, if you don't mention someone's name, then they're a non-person.
Why is that? Or is it just space on the newspaper? Are reasons to not put names down, is that legitimate as far as within the present consideration, or is it just, what are we looking at here? What's the problem?
The
Well, I
specific.
think. Sorry,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Hayden.
Is the
I was just gonna
specific
say. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. I'm done.
I apologize. I'll be quick. I was just
No,
gonna
like,
say
go
that
ahead.
I
Go
think.
ahead.
I've always wanted to see about these kind of choir things, so we can write our own, sing this Woody Guthrie song together, just be a cappella. But no, anyways, move on.
What?
I was just gonna say that it's kind of controlling the narrative. How we were talking about, is it significant whether names are left out or left in? Because like even today with some of the current issues we're seeing, there are certain things that are completely left out, so that way the conversation doesn't highlight something or doesn't spotlight something. I don't know. That's anyway. Aiden, I'll throw it to you.
Bring up good points. So this is something I want you guys to ask yourselves. Actually, I'm asking you, but ask yourselves. Bringing that in consideration. It is up to us people, the next generation, next students, to tell the people in the past, whether or not they're alive or they're passed away, to say that it was wrong. And then the assumption is that now there is a disconnect within memory, maybe because the next generation, or a skip somewhere within the generation that remembers this stuff. Is that something that we're supposed to be doing? Is that something that is acceptable? And the stuff that goes on in the past like this, you forgot to, what is it? I mean, okay, let me rephrase. Is being described as deportee, is that just because, well, they're moving around, so they're migratory, they're nomadic lifestyle and culture, and it's just, we can't get their names, but now we can get them. Is that important to, what do we always have to look back and say, okay, now we can correct this? It's really, let's go to the next question then, and let's see, maybe I can reconfigure what I'm trying to get to. Okay, Victoria, gotcha. What was the last question? I'm not sure.
I think that one was it about the would
Oh,
King
there we go.
Guthrie poem.
Okay. Let's go to the last question for right now. All right. That's very good stuff. Thank you. All right. You get into power. A lot of this is based on, recent ways of looking at history on the college campus over the last, well, even after you will see the impact of the civil rights post World War II, atomic bombs, civil rights movement, Vietnam War, how that impacted our look at history. And Victoria does a really good job of showing us that. A lot of it is, looking at just the history itself, just being the history of the victor, and really brings a good point of why it's important to bring out voices we cannot hear. All right, which is probably something I touched upon just a little bit here, not explicitly too much, but Victoria does a good job in being very, very explicit in it. I think everybody sees that as everyone. Thanks, Victoria.
Yeah, I like the way she put that because it kind of even ties into that. Like, just refer to people as deportees. It kind of presents them as disposable,
Mhm.
and that's
Okay.
I don't know. I feel like as people in history, we have to correct that.
All right, there's two things that I need. Here, I'll go ahead. What was the last question? I think we'll go ahead and move forward to a little bit for the rest of the class. Before I do, I want to go ahead and get on the soapbox that I haven't gone on. All right, the question you got to ask yourselves is two things, and then I'll probably go ahead and bring this up because we brought up Rocky Ford. Now, I want to go ahead and touch upon move the little historical chronology, move it around a little bit, just a little bit, not too much. Two things. All right, the question is whether or not they knew better at the time. Do you know better? All right, Woody Guthrie, obviously, that's what he was doing. He was calling them out, doing it in a way to just be first poetic and just because doing it in a way that people will listen to the poetry or the music. All right, a certain group of people that he knows he got a connection to, he's got an audience. So you see how I segue into that? I'm sorry. It just, anyone. Okay, saw his audience, who his audience was, and how he was able to get that message as quickly out as possible because he knew his audience. All right, he knew that they knew better. At least he thinks that they should know better. That's what the deal is. It's right there, present time. It ain't so much as we're looking at it now and looking what he said. And well, okay, we know better now, but did they know better? What year was it? 19 Bracero program, 30s or 40s or so. As you'll see, by the 1920s, everybody was starting to become concerned about the treatment and the rights of migrant workers. Okay, and it was always a push politically to kind of just, don't worry about all that. That's nonsense. All right, it's nonsense. And so the problem within the narrative, as probably Trevor may have discussed in the way, is what kind of narrative is it? Well, is it political? Mostly this politically polarized narrative. I don't want to get into picking which side is right on anything right now. It's not what I'm trying to get at. It is the history, is what history needs to be. What is history? All right. What are the hidden voices? Let's go ahead and get into a few minutes of, I don't, let's see. Okay, so let me get to slideshow. we got so really quick, the sugar beet industry, sugar beet companies in the area, Arkansas Valley, but throughout Colorado and really nationally at the turn of the century, 20th century, was a way of trying to get this labor in because, oh, we figured, remember when they came up with the idea of sugar beets within the mid part of the 19th century. I don't know if you guys saw that, right? In regards to, hey, we have this idea to make money, but take advantage that there's possibility of being able to grow this within this arid environment. Okay, with very little rain, very little rain, that this is going to work out. Okay, because we need sugar. Everybody's got a sweet tooth, but we don't want to get. It takes too much money, and we can kind of just push away the Southeast Asia in regards to their sugar cane. But sugar beets will do just fine, and the sugar be much sweeter. And I think we got a way of doing it. Well, you know, it took them almost over 50 years and didn't until 1890, 1900, when everything was mobilized and infrastructure improved agriculturally, transportation-wise, in one centralized area. That included labor, all right? So what they did was not only that, there was a strong, ardent sense of colonialism, not colonization. All right, but it's important that we distinguish what colonization is, all right, really briefly. And one of the things I want to bring into here is child labor, child education, and as how this colonization brought challenges here. Probably first thing to bring forth now, finally, is how this change within modern aspects of labor just put so much social, economic, social, and cultural pressure on different groups of people. Okay, and within certain cultural ethnic groups. Okay, child labor and child education, for example. And how it was when this came about, then, well, that's no consideration of any agency for the environment ecologically. Really, it's always the environment that becomes the ones that are left out. All right. So it was Ruben Donata. He's a teacher, well, he's a professor at UC Boulder, Department of Education. He wrote about this period of time, 1920, 1960, but particularly about the Mexican and Hispanos within Colorado schools and community. I tell you, at times it's really easier to read their articles that they write before they write their book. And that's like here within 2003 in the journal Latinos in Education. He wrote the article, and I'll be honest, yeah, I see the advantage of some small little journal academic articles. Surprisingly enough, I read a bit of Mexican Hispanos in Colorado schools. It's an ebook. I got it on my iPad. I have a hard enough time. I don't know. It must be the tactile thing. I want to read a book, but I don't know what it is. It's an article to me. It's written better. In 2003, his book based on it. He just like that's what scholars, the professors do. They write an article and then they do up their book on monograph, and it's just somewhere. I like the article better. It's very strange. Really, it is what we'll look here real quick is what is colonialism. All know what it is, really, honestly. You see how empires and people in power moved after 1500. Really, we can start after Columbus. Imperialism. Imperialism was on two sides to every coin. It wasn't just the West, it was also the East. All right. The Portuguese came over as far as to like China in the 16th century. All right, but it was occupying of space, and then we're trying to establish some sort of trade in regards to like the Portuguese initially. An advantage was, you know, the ships and the navigation on the seas and the way the currents went, took advantage of it, and, you know, trying had the technology improved as far as finding direction and looking at the stars, but then the conquering of other peoples and their land, but particularly trying to uh, be that power beyond the main borders of one's nation or nation, culturally or politically. So that's what you see. Portuguese, a very small island, very small part of the Iberian Peninsula, and they wanted to extend out their sovereignty out beyond their normal borders. Okay, Spain, almost foregone conclusion. We've already talked about it. And let's not get into world history. Again, Spain doing the exact same thing. But then here's Mexico. What about, why do I have Mexico in big, bold, and in question marks? What about Mexico? Let's get back to continental US. Why do I put Mexico here? Was Mexico an empire?
I mean, it was at one point, and then Spain came in and colonized them, and then we've then in the United States we sort of colonized parts of northern Mexico, so it's kind of Mexico's kind of gotten back and forth.
Okay, so what was the big gold land down there that starts with a T? Mexico was an empire, yeah. After independence, it was still an empire. They had all that land, Texas, American Southwest. What was they using as similar to what Spain was doing to extend out their sovereignty beyond their Mexico City? What was they? We've already talked about a very key part of the history of Arkansas Valley. Land grants.
Mm-hmm.
What was the purpose of land grants?
To give land and control of the land to people who would maintain it and be loyal to the Mexican or Spanish or Mexican government.
Okay, yeah, I'm not trying to stomp on you, Anna. I'm actually building upon a segue. So what was Spain and then Mexico successful within their colonizing within their empire, extension of their empire in long term for like the area of southern Colorado and northern New Mexico? Were they successful?
No,
No. Why do you say no?
because they eventually lost all that territory. The people that were living there didn't have loyalty to Mexico. They just had loyalty to the land, which was given to them by Mexico. But in the end, they just didn't really care.
How do we measure success here? Is it the those within the actual political power, military power at the time from New Mexico in short term, or is the success within history and how the history is looked at like till today and looked at as a failure? What is aspect of success here? Imperialism. You don't have to answer that. That's even a question I can't figure out. We'll not talk too much about the East. I think you guys got a kind of an idea. Colonization, though, was different after a certain period of time, as within the biggest marker of that difference is seen within as Western influence on East Asia, particularly to China and Japan. And I've already told you all a little bit of the history of Japan. It's a really good way to distinguish that modern concept as far as 20th century, and that's Japan. We've already talked about how the modernization within Japan, which really started militarily in their response to the U.S. and Britain, really actually the response to threat to China was modernization. And their way of modernizing was colonization, particularly like Korea, something near dear to my heart. Even before World War II, and it was racial type thing. It's like, okay, let's bring them in. Taiwan, for example, and I've already seen the aspect of this is also seen as they open up immigration. All right, it was, hey, let's keep the Imperial Japan towards World War II was his extension of land outwards to protect actually the main part of China or Japan itself. We are going to extend out our sovereignty in both politically, militarily. Within that, of course, is economic and then social, cultural, in order just to protect the very land of that Japan. All right, something similar to China did for the longest time. All right, what time is it? Okay, so I kind of touched. What time is it? I can't even bring up my own doggone clock.
11:41.
142.
Okay.
Right at 11:42.
Thank you. I got about 10 minutes or so. Really, let's just see what I got here. Okay, so let's not go too far. Let me skip this slide. Really, it's going back to one part trait of modernity, but also within modernity is modern, is colonization, colonialism. There is a difference that we'll have to look at. This is what I want. I want to make sure you guys understand that in regards to the sugar beet company as an economic profit-making entity within the U.S., I guess, and capitalism, the aspect of colonization and colonialism is different, but similar traits. And for the last few minutes, I wanted to bring in what may be considered similar. And that similarity is here within labor, at least. Okay. And if really you start at a baseline and build your way out, you're probably going to see that there really is no distinction, but you as a student of history will have to make that determination on your own. Hence the statement of need or statement of protest within a more broad consideration, whether or not you want to talk about specifically. I'm not asking you to do that, but at least now you have a more broad consideration. Labor, we talked how, what was labor considered before modern times as what? You know, just owing that, who owns someone's labor? The prince in his castle, as you're the little serf, you know, serfdom, feudalism, again, east and west, what your labor was not based on your aspects of your worth. You weren't worth anything. You can't consider yourself worth. It's the prince. The prince is one that has the worth because of your physical person. Okay, that changed, right? As we get closer to modern time and up until now, and how we describe labor. And what was the comparative term we used? Look back at back in the Ludlow massacre. Okay, in industry, mining. I'm using some key words here. How did we look now as what was taken, and compare that to labor now within agriculture? What's the word I'm looking for? Pulling. That's a good keyword. Pulling. What are we pulling? What are we taking? What's another word for taking? What was the main problem with the Ludlow massacre? What were they protesting? Labor, right? What was the consideration of labor at the time? consider it philosophical differences and the change of how we look at someone's physical action, labor, okay, and then extracting. You remember that?
Mhm.
Okay, so that's what the difference is I, a human, realizing that you are extracting, not I'm extracting something from the ground, or I'm extracting out something that is grown and then it's fed to feed cattle or sheep, or not directly as towards my family. You are, I want a wage, but the wage I can't afford to feed my family because company store has high inflated prices. Okay, we didn't make it to this, but we'll leave it at this. This is Ruben Donato's book he wrote in 2007. Let me get you out of the way. This is the front cover of his book. And he took something that was a poster that was published by the Sugar Beet Company in 1920s, a poster. Shows a family. This is what they had inside the book. This is a family standing next to an adobe built home, established within a labor colony. All right, specifically in the way they had this constructed was how really we can define colonization. All right. To inform Mexican Hispanos how they might own homes under the company's colonization plan. So it's not my words. Okay, it's really not his. It's their words. It says right there on the poster. Okay, I was going to translate it, but who knows what aviso means? Aviso. Okay, I don't know. I was going to translate this last night, but I forgot. But really, this is the poster. Most of these buildings at the time when they established these colonies were adobe, which means mud and straw, whatever, is mixed inside and built upon to establish a structure. And I think they're reasonably insulated, I think that's the advantage of it to some extent. All right. So you can hit this link once I poke. This goes to another little thing done up. This is actually Marcial here. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. Can somebody, what's his last name? Marcial Hijar. This is his, okay. Family out front, actually, at Fort Morgan. This is done up Great Western Sugar Company, which I was not saying properly last time when I mentioned the sugar beet industry in Northeast Colorado. All right, it was the Great Western Sugar Company. All right. So this was used to get and hire, promote workers. All right. And really what we'll do is end it here because I know we're at the end of class. We'll look at this as a way of segueing into your next discussion response. So you need to take what it is that what you look at here as far as colonization. Okay, I'll put these slides up. Your next one is, this is discussion response number 3. All right. Take a look. I'll even put what Antonio gave me. I'll put that on Zotero. All right, his biography, these slides, you can look at this link. All right, I had a couple left, but consideration of law colonial. So this is your next discussion prompt. All right, now, should I leave it open-ended and give you a question? So what is, listen very carefully, that way you can just, I'll give you a lead research problem. What aspects within colonialism and La Colonia, sugar beet companies colonize labor colonies, how far do we go in regards to difference or similarities between colonization and the establishment of labor colonies within the sugar beet industry? So there is your next question to answer. But your question to answer is what you've already built upon through the midterm and statement of need or statement of protest, and what other discussions response were. So you already have built evidence and you already built analytical statements based on those evidence, okay? And you're still deciding what you want to do with the next final, or the final, and your statement of need, statement of protest. You continue on, you want to reconfigure around your statements and you know, what you defined as your questions and how you answered them. This is how you're going to build to it. All right. So here's the kind of the centerpiece in regards to the next discussion response number 3. Consider La Colonia. And really we'll get to the point when Antonio comes on board Tuesday or Thursday about the colony in Lamar, which he was there as a child. Along Grenada, also Grenada. What? Oh man, I can't hear you. Who is that? Oh. I couldn't hear you. Is that? All right. So I'll leave you with that. I will let you get to, do not just go in there and, you know, write or down the question I just gave you guys, but build upon what it is that, other than considering the comparative with overall history, is whether or not this consideration of colonization and labor has anything to do. You know what? Let's see. I should give you guys a chance to listen to Antonio before you have it. You need to write out. So I really should. Let me see. I should probably come aboard on Tuesday and have your discussion response due next Thursday instead of Tuesday. How about that? That sounds reasonable. Just because I have a guest speaker. All right. So of course. All right. So I will do that. All right. But consider that next week's assigned readings and hemp workshop that we will get upon next week. This is where we start looking at really hard data. Don't forget, bring forth the other demographic statistics that will be looked upon since the beginning of it. Now, don't worry too as far as that. Don't just keep that, because we're gonna actually forcing you guys now to look at some different data. So take into consideration now just what we're looking at now. All right. Now, I guess I'm actually telling you to kind of keep it. Don't worry about the actual demographics of the, as we saw in the beginning. So that was the first discussion respond. Go ahead and just keep that to the side. So that way, I mean, that's your toolkit for later on. Go with what I just shot out for number 3 here, and then Antonio. So yeah, I am telling you, push, keep something. All right, so Thursday, discussion response number 3. I want to upload it. It's going to be where it's set up as an assignment on Blackboard, and you just upload it. And excuse me for taking so long today. A little bit over, it's probably the first time. So Tuesday, Antonio Escabel. Just come forth with questions, and I think I'll leave it at that for now. And anything, I'll stand by. You guys have a good day.
Would you be willing to email the prompt out or have the prompt written out on Blackboard for discussion 3?
Hold on. Hey, what's up? Yeah. Uh-huh. Not really, no. You grab some Chick-fil-A. Yeah. All right. I'm still in class, so. But yeah, I'll shoot out the prompt.
Okay, perfect.
I'll shoot it out.
Yeah, sorry, my computer is trash, so I couldn't hear anyone during that discussion for half of it, so I had to leave.
Oh, what is I wish I could keep this on my radar after class. I mean, after in the semester about the problems and the internet issues in rural. Are you up in you're just home? You in Pueblo area or? Huh?
I am in the Pueblo area, but yeah, this computer. I only have one computer. It's like I bought it for like $100 on some like cheap website, but it's really good for just writing papers and that's it. So
How old is your computer there? Is it a laptop?
yeah, it's a laptop. I've had it since I started school, and I don't have enough money to buy a new one, so I'm just hoping this one survives.
Is it a Dell?
I think HP. I don't know. It's in the back. I'm terrible with technology. HP.
You know, you can check a laptop out from the library. Did you know? I don't know if you knew that. You can go on to their IT help desk website, UCSU Pueblo, and reserve a laptop. I can't hear you. Oh, are you saying that those would probably be slower? I can't hear you. All right, it was not. All right, I can't hear you. So
Like, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
What you were saying after I told you about.
Yeah, the library.
Yeah.
Right, I heard that. Yeah, see, my computer works as long as I'm just writing papers, which is the only reason I have this computer. Zoom was just one of these things that I'm forced into using now since there's no in-class thing. So I'm just sort of hoping that after the semester I don't have to do anything else.
Well, that's a good idea to go and get one from them. I think it may solve. It sounds like you've got some actual technical. You got some obsolete hardware. I don't mean offense on that. I just go.
Well, none taken. It's the reality of the situation.
All right, but I think maybe their silly Dell laptops will work if you're in Pueblo. So I think it may be where it's set up to handle your, whatever more, I guess, multitasking type stuff. From what I heard from the other day, you opened up something that's normal to be opened up, but they couldn't handle the video conference. So you got I don't know, maybe a dual CPU or something that can't handle or enough memory. So I'm sure, yeah, just that's my recommendation. I had back. I can't. Let me see if I can kind of. You can get. Oh, let's see. Sent.
But it's probably a combination of things since my internet is pretty slow and cheap as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I will. Let me forward this to you right now.
Okay.
And that way is something I did send to Kelsey, but she must have been considering other ideas of postponing turning in assignments. But let me see if I have anything bad here. Okay. So yeah, go on to csupueblo.supportsystem.com, and if you'd like, that's up to you. So I emailed it to you. Go in there and see about. I would recommend you at least try it out and see if it solves any of your issues. Really, they're there to help you out with these very specific technical issues as a student. That was probably one of their number one priorities of helping out students as far as within online classes and the current outbreak. So, so I sent it to you. You should just be able to at least try it out.
Yeah, we'll do.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Professor.
Yep.
Have a good day. See you.
Yeah.